Before we begin tonight's lecture, let me introduce our presenters this evening. First, we have Cheri Dundon, who started as a summer resident in the Benzie area in 2002. After retiring in 2009, she and her husband moved to the area. She's been with the Historical Society since 2014 and is our head archivist. And let's be honest, we can't live without her. We also have Steve Veatch, originally from Colorado, a volunteer researcher and history writer for the Benzie Area Historical Society. And he is also the vice president of the board of directors for the society. So if you would, please join me in welcoming Steve and Cheri as they present 1906, A Summer to Remember.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, you have a singular opportunity this afternoon to buy this companion guide. $10 a piece. It's worth at least twice that. And the money is going to help support the museum and our archival activities. This all started when Cheri showed some photographs to me, and we looked at these photographs and we thought we should take a deeper dive. Barb Mort is the one that received them, and a letter that went with these photographs, and everything was connected to Reverend Henry S. Wannamaker, one of the founders of the CSA, the Congregational Summer Assembly. We wanted to identify the people in the photographs, and Cheri used a tree using ancestry.com. And we dug and we dug and we dug. We got down to where the blue clams were squirting. And we were able to slowly identify the children, the location, and we discovered a story so big, so bold, it had to be told. And here is that story. There was one summer we experienced that is so intense, so magical, that we never forget it. You've all had those. The summer of 1906, spent in the Crystal Lake area of Michigan, was like that for the 7 children of Henry S. Wannamaker and his wife, Mary. There were also some troubling times before and after the summer of 1906. There were some dark clouds that we'll take a look at.
So we'll get into the characters here. This is Henry Siebels Wannamaker. He was born in 1861 in Orangeburg, South Carolina, to Captain Jacob George Wannamaker and Ellen Baker Siebels. His family went back generations as huge, large plantation and slave owners. In fact, during my research on the 1860 slave schedule, his father, Captain Jacob, owned 141 slaves. He had 2 siblings and 5 half-siblings. He received his BA from Wofford University in 1884 and his divinity degree from Yale in 1887. Mary was born in 1863 in New Haven, Connecticut, to Myron Winslow Filey and Cleora Gilbert. She had 4 siblings. Her father, Myron, was a very prominent figure in New Haven with his successful photography and gallery business. And during my research on Myron, I found that he has the New Haven Museum has a very, very large collection of his photography there.
Cheri came up with the idea of presenting this story in a timeline. So we have created one, and we'll follow a timeline through this narrative. In 1887, Henry, the father, graduated from Yale with a divinity degree, where he met his wife, Mary, while attending Yale. In 1887, Henry and Mary get married in New Haven, Connecticut. They go out to Nebraska, where he is the pastor of a congregational church. In 1889, Phyllis is born in Nebraska. They're now in Geneva, Nebraska. 2 years later, they're in Lincoln, Nebraska, where Homer is born. 2 years later, they're still in Lincoln, and Cleora is born. 1895 in Peoria, Illinois, Gladys is born. Then Walter is born in Springfield 2 years later. Another year goes by, and Victor is born and in Elyria, Ohio. In 1900, the family is together in Elyria, and I have a historic photo from the archives with everybody there except the last child to be born, and he's born in 1904, and that's Joyce. He's also called John. We'll continue the timeline a little bit. We'll go advance to 1903. Henry had been asked to investigate the possibility of establishing a summer Bible college. In 1900, the Cleveland Association of Congregational Churches met to consider this question. He would make several trips each year from his home in Ohio, where he was the pastor, to look for suitable places. He arrived on the Frankfort side of Crystal Lake in 1903, where he began to organize the Congregational Summer Assembly, a summer camp for the Congregational Church ministers and laypersons. Henry is one of 4 men who founded the CSA. The other 3 were Hull, Crane, and Wilcox. Wannamaker would become a key figure in the early days of the CSA. He also served as the general secretary for several years. But trouble comes. Time marches on.
The family is living in Elyria, Ohio, and Henry's the pastor of that church, the Congregational Church. When Mary discovers that Henry has been having an affair with a Mrs. Mary Fulton. Because the public had taken what he considered an improper interest in his life and his domestic affairs, and because his name had been linked with a woman member of his congregation, he rented the opera house in town to explain his troubles with his wife.
We had never heard anything like that. You get in trouble with your wife, you don't go rent an opera house and invite everybody in the town to come and listen.
And it was in the paper. In an article in the Washington Post, September 29th, 2005, Pastor Frank with the public. He created a sensation last Monday night by calling a meeting of the congregation, and with his wife present, explained that he and his wife could not agree and that they had decided to separate. The wife next day filed suit for divorce. Since then, the scandal has been common talk, in the name of Mrs. Fulton, a young widow, about 10 years younger than Henry, has been brought into the discussion in such a manner as to make a statement by the Reverend Wannamaker imperative. Tonight, he said, "I've always been a ladies' man, and I have escorted Mrs. Fulton home possibly a great many times in the past 7 years, but the church council will not have anything to do with that. It is purely a private matter. My wife and I talked over the divorce, and I agreed to let her do as she pleased." Mary, and they had a trial, okay. Mary testified that she knew of her husband's infancy with the widow organist of his flock 5 years earlier in 1900. She stated that Henry told her that she was a millstone around his neck, keeping him back in his profession, and that it would be far better if she would die. And he compelled his frail wife, who was worn out with the cares of the children, to get down upon her knees with him and join him in a prayer that she would die.
Isn't that incredible?
Oh, there's more. When Mary Wannamaker told Henry she was going to get a divorce, he said, "I wouldn't give you enough money to get you out of the yard." Two of the witnesses at this trial were his oldest daughter Phyllis and his third daughter Cleora. Phyllis testified that she found a letter from Mary Fulton to her dad, and she gave it to her mother. Cleora testified, this one kills me. Cleora testified that she was told to pass notes between her dad and Mary Fulton and to not tell her mother. Mary testified that he had been unfaithful for almost 12 years, starting in Peoria, Illinois. The trial showed 12 years of shameful and inhumane treatment by Henry, including locking her in a room and forcing her to pray to die, denying her help when she was in labor for their youngest son, Joyce, and making her go to the neighbors for help. According to the newspaper, he was always careful to conceal his cruelties and outbreaks of temper. Her divorce was granted December 15, 1905. She got custody of all children ages 14 months to 16 years. She got $30 a month alimony for 5 years, a deed to a house and lot in Frankfort, and a deed to half of a 60-acre farm near Frankfort. Our story with Mary and the children starts in the summer of 1906.
Here's a really cool photo of Mary and the kids as they settle into their cottage on the CSA Lot 16. It's 157 South Shore West. And there's little Joyce in his dress. I don't think we have any pictures of him until he's an adult when he's wearing pants. But that was the style in those days. And there is where their cottage is on the shore of Crystal Lake in the CSA subdivision. And then Mary, the wife, had a lot of property here in Oberlin. And later on, they would sell some of those lots so some of the kids could go to college. There is that home, and you can see Mary sitting there, and there's Homer and some of the kids. There's a little baby there, that's Joyce. And we think that tent may have been erected so that they could live there while the renter in there vacated, but we're not certain. We couldn't verify that. But it was the first cottage was built by a woodcutter or the Grace Lumber Company. And there's a view of Homer's tent. Homer was 15 when he put that together, and it was right next to their house. So it was a pretty substantial tent, even had a fireplace. And another view of their home in the Congregational Summer Assembly. And she owned the property for 5 years, then cashed in the chips. This was on the back of one of the historic photos we have in our collection. And it said, "From Mother's Cottage to the highway." And that's pretty rough country back in there. The trees crowded along the edges of the road, and occasionally or commonly you would have to step over exposed roots. They were tripping hazards. There's Joyce, and you can smell the scent of earth and decaying leaves. There's buzzing insects everywhere, birds chirping, wind would rustle through the trees. It was quite a place. There's Homer's tent, so you can imagine that their home is right next to that. There's little Joyce going down the trail, the road. Bears roamed around through the forest there, blood-sucking insects everywhere, working those kids over. And here's just a brief recapitulation of the 7 children. And a very important man comes into their life. In 1906, a special summer.
This is Uncle Walter. Owen Filey, one of Mary's brothers. He joined them in 1906 in Frankfurt. Mary and Walter came from a lot of money. And we always, Steve and I would talk about, why did Walter go up there? What's the purpose here? Well, I think Mom and Dad were worried about Mary and 7 kids up in the middle of nowhere. So Walter joined them. He had served in the U.S. Navy in the Spanish-American War, and he graduated from the Yale School of Forestry in 1906. So he was a fresh graduate. He took many, many photos of Mary and the children, and we are using many of those in our presentation.
Uncle Walter had a huge impact on the lives of these children that summer. He gave them dance lessons, swimming lessons, trips to Point Betsy Lighthouse, boat making. He showed them the beauty of the natural world. He would hike them through the woods and teach them about the forest. They would explore the shorelines of ponds where they would catch frogs, watch turtles, comb beaches, pick up little rocks, and run around barefoot.
The oldest daughter, Phyllis, recorded this in her diary about those dreamy days when she was 16 years old. I believe it was the pleasantest summer I ever spent. Uncle Walter taught us all to swim and float and made us a boat and taught us how to handle it, and then read to us and taught us to notice more around us, the woods and so on. He tried to teach Cleora, who was 13 at the time, and me how to dance, and he took me to several parties at the Davis Inn in Cresselia and made us all enjoy ourselves.
This is that Davis Inn, later the Three Pines Inn, north of the CSA on Crystal Lake. This is where Uncle Walter taught Phyllis and Cleora to dance. W.L. Davis, owner of the lodge, later added a dining room, and his Sunday evening chicken dinners became legendary.
We're going to start now with the photos that Walter took. This is the 4th of July. Homer's not in the picture because we believe Homer had a job. We just don't know where. Here they're on the beach. You'll see in a minute. I don't know which one that is, blowing up those floater things. One of the girls has Joyce in her arms. They're all ready to go swimming.
This is Crystal Beach. Oh, this is a great photo. There they are with their water rings, but they didn't have enough to blow up to put on poor Victor. So he's over here. It looks like syrup cans. Empty syrup cans they've strapped on that poor kid's back.
Here's Philip with bathing shoe trouble. I think that was written on the back.
Yeah, it was on the back.
Of the photograph. Here's Cleora and Joyce. I can't get used to calling that kid Joyce. In his dress and in the water, having a good time.
There's a rowboat behind there. They may have gone out to row a little bit.
Here he is. With looks like maybe tin cans out of the kitchen or something to dig in the dirt, make sand castles or something. We're not sure. Oh, this is a good one. I'll let Steve talk about this one.
I'm not sure Homer took, or Uncle Walter took this because it's a little bit blurry, but maybe he did. But there's all the kids, there's Walter and Victor, being buried in sand on the shores of Crystal Lake. There's the older boy, Homer, and there's a little Joyce and two of the girls, but they're having a grand old time playing at the beach. One of the sisters is busy reading something.
Here's all the kids. Again, Homer is gone. Joyce isn't in the picture. They're kind of half, I don't think they're gonna go swimming, except maybe the boys, they've got short pants on. But this is what they were always barefoot, just having a good time. Walter taking pictures. Oh, here's two of the girls coming down one of the dunes. Looks like they're in their Sunday best. Their hair's kind of piled up and they got ribbons in them and they got their good shoes on. I don't know where they're going.
This is the frog. And I think I can hear the frogs. This is quite a photograph. But yeah, they were really interested in anything that had to do with nature, from watching turtles to listening to frogs and watching them hop about. Oh, this is an interesting photograph that we have in our archives. It's the Wannamaker children with another group of young people, maybe people from the CSA have gathered with them, but the red arrows point out some of the Wannamaker kids. After working with this, Cheri and I, for almost a year, it's like, these are our relatives. We know these kids. And
This is, and when it says Vic in the foreground, we think that's Uncle Walter's writing. This is at Point Betsy, and there's Victor right there. You can see some of the buildings. I love this picture. I think this is so cool. It shows what it was like in 1906.
the life-saving service is practicing a rescue drill, and that's what everybody's watching, and that's what's going on in the background there. Oh, this is my favorite picture. There's Walter with a cap on, sitting on a wooden box, and he's cleaning a bluegill, and he's showing Victor how to do it. And it looks like Walter's feet are the bottoms are probably tougher than elephant hide, running around barefoot. And another photograph of everybody sitting on the front porch. Homer's not there, but everybody else is there. And this is probably a few years later, maybe 1908, when some of the sisters are getting ready to depart, and they're down on a pier in Frankfurt, getting ready to get on a ship. So this is an interesting thing. After that notorious divorce, old Henry pulls up stakes and he goes to New Mexico, and some say he founded a town, others say he promoted other congregational ministers to go down to this wild place in New Mexico territory that's really nothing more than a spot to brand cattle and where cattle drives come and go. And it's in northeastern New Mexico. And he starts promoting it in 1906. Other ministers from the Congregational Church comes. He's advertising heavily in church newspapers about coming to New Mexico territory and homestead. Trainloads of land-hungry people arrived from 1907 to 1915 to stake a claim in this God-forsaken plain wilderness. There's not any trees like we have here. They have to build homes out of rocks. It attracted more than at least 40 older ministers from the congregational churches to settle there. And as time squeaked by, Amistad would grow. And I just got this photograph a couple of days ago from the New Mexico State University Library Archives, and this is a picture of downtown Amistad about the time 2 years after Henry was there. And there's an oil well in the corner. This looks like a hotel. These are horse-drawn buggies. There's a big wagon full of lumber. They're probably going to build some more false front buildings. And I blew it up so you can see it a little bit better. And there's that wagon, and there's the buggy, and another one there, over there. Some guys standing out in front of the hotel. So this is where Henry is. By 1908, there's 183 houses that are just outside the view of that photograph. There's 250 families living there. And Sunday services are held in a business building until a church is built. They end up with 27 ministers, 2 blacksmiths, 8 carpenters, 4 doctors, 2 music teachers, one of whom is Mary Fulton. She shows up again. Yeah, she shows up again. And we think she's doing more than teaching music. And there's 1 surveyor, 1 electrician, and the rest are farmers. By 1911, there's 450 people living on this windswept plain. Later, when hard times struck, much of the population drifted away, but the village still remains today. There's an aerial view of Amistad, just a few buildings left, post office. Not much there. There's a little history museum there. And I called and called and called to try to see what photographs they had, and they never returned my call. We think that may be one of the congregational churches. It's now a Methodist church.
Now you have to remember what Amistad looked like in 1908. Keep that in mind here. Mary and Henry got married again.
What?
By the Reverend Harlow Mills, pastor of our congregational church here in Benzonia. Mary was listed as a housekeeper on the marriage registry, and Henry is listed as a railroad employee. Their son Walter, who was only 11 years old, was one of the witnesses. Their first marriage was October 27, 1887. Their second marriage was October 27, 1908. So now he's taken his children back to Amistad. This is a 1910 photo. He has the entire family down there, and he's now listed on that census as the railroad superintendent. The son Homer also works for the railroad, and the oldest daughter Phyllis is a college student.
We're fallacious.
Here we go. Okay, 1911 headline from the Evening Telegram: pastor of the city again in trouble. Mrs. Wannamaker appealed to the citizens of Amistad, alleging her husband paid attentions to Mrs. Fulton, and a posse of men, this is in the paper, went to the Fulton home, broke down the door, dragged him out from the house in his nightclothes, fainting with barrel staves, and spread tar upon his naked body and rolled it into Wannamaker resigned and could not be located by the sheriff when he attempted to serve him with his second divorce summons. Henry sent letters to family members asking for assistance after he was kicked out of town. Yes, that is the same Mary Fulton, Arriva in 1905. So she followed him down to New Mexico. I had to find Mary and the kids, and I didn't know where they went. So I find them through city directories in Highland Park, Detroit. She was there in the 1915 and 1919 directories and the 1920 census. The 20 census shows all of the kids working except Joyce.
Our timeline continues to advance. It's 1920. Henry and Mary are reunited on Orcas Island, Washington. Another 10 years goes by, and now they're in another part of Washington. He is now a minister, and the census states they own their own home valued at $1,000. It's now 1940. Mary and Henry are in Lincoln County, Washington. Henry is the minister of a local church. Their income is about $1,200 per year, and they are renting a house for $20 a month. And here are the children. There's Mary, the mother. There's Henry, the wayward minister. And some of the children as adults. And if you look at Mary, she's just plain puckered out. There's all kinds of hands on her, holding her, propping her up.
This photo had to have been mid to late. She died in 1946, so I'm thinking she's not too long for this life here. Steve got these older photos from the Mary Ann Trigg who donated the first batch. So the ones you'll see now are all when the kids are elderly and mom and dad are elderly. Mary passed away in 1946. She's buried at the Fairfield Memorial Park Cemetery in Santa Ana, Orange County. After Mary passes away, Henry, who's elderly, will live with his oldest daughter, Phyllis, and her husband, George. Her husband, she married an elderly man. He's 81, Phyllis is 61, and Henry is 89, and they're continuing to work their farm. Henry passed away November 15th, 1955. He and Mary are buried in the Fairfield Memorial Park together in Santa Ana. So, I just was real curious to find out what happened to Mrs. Mary Fulton. Where did she go after this scandal down at Amistad? Mary's mother leaves Amistad about 1911 or 12. I found her in California, and she's in the city directory and listed as a clairvoyant, which just kind of cracked me up. Anyway, Mary met and married a wealthy gentleman from Iowa. His name was Granville Naylor. They got married in Amistad in 1913. So Mary is still in Amistad after everything that happened in 1911. She's still there. I thought, okay, how did she meet this Granville Naylor? Where did he come from? So then I had to research him, and I found him living in Iowa he was a widower. His wife had died in 1912. His son, Johnny, I found him buried in a cemetery in Amistad. So he had gone down there to work the railroad or whatever he was doing. He is buried down there. So you kind of have to use conjecture and go, how did they meet? Well, obviously son died down there. He went down to either bring him home or bury him down there. And he met Mary. And they were married in Amsterdam. He had some money and property, and they went back to Iowa. They were there for several years, and then they ended up in Colorado. He was a wealthy rancher and real estate developer. By their later years, they were in California. They died in 45 and 48, and Mary and this husband are buried in Los Angeles area. So what happened to the kids? We know they had quite a life with their dad and mom for several years. Mary Phyllis was a school teacher for a long, long time, and married George Harris in 1944 when she was 54. She passed away in 1976 at the age of 87. She and her husband are buried in the Los Angeles area.
Homer became a civil engineer and married Alva Lockhart in Frankfurt in 1920. He would go to college, and Alva was a school teacher. Homer and Alva had 3 children. He passed away in 1979 and is buried in the same cemetery plot as his mom and dad, Mary and Henry. And there he is, a little bit older.
Leora became a school teacher also. I found her going to China in 1921 to do missionary work. She returned to the U.S. in 1924. She gave Medical Lake, Washington as her home address. On the 1930 census, she is stated as a widow with a daughter and lives with her brother Victor in Huntington Park. She married a Philip Bruce in 1932, and they had a daughter together. She passed away in 1974 in Monterey, California. Gladys, like other siblings, I think 4 of them went to Oberlin. She married classmate Walter Stone in 1920. They're in Nashville, Tennessee on the 30 and 40 census. By 50, they're living in Hanover, Indiana. Gladys is a therapist and Walter is a professor, and Gladys and Walter had 3 children. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1970 at the CSA dining hall.
She comes back, I believe 17 years later, and she's rowed across Crystal Lake. And there she is. 17 years later. And this is Stacy Daniels' daughter. He's on our board. Walter married Jeanette Walters in 1924. They divorced in 1937. They didn't have any children. He is a music teacher in Van Buren County. On his World War II registration, he is listed as John Walter. He changed his name. We don't know why he did that. He married his second wife, Lucille, in 1944. They would live out on the east side of Michigan in either Bad Axe or Owasso. On the 1950 census, he is listed as John W. and the band director at Bad Axe High School. In 1953, he's in Owasso as a high school teacher. And we were so excited to find pictures of him as an adult. They just didn't seem to exist. But Cheri, digging even deeper, found 2 pictures of him. So we know what he looked like. He passed away in 1977. The name on his grave marker is John Walter Wannamaker. And we may never know why he changed his name. Then there's Victor. He served in World War I in the 17th Field Artillery. In 1920, he's living with his mother and siblings in Detroit. In 22, he's at the University of Minnesota. He marries Grace Moody in California. And there's a nice picture of him and his wife. They remained in California and prospered in the radio and TV business. Brother John, or Joyce, the boy that wore the dresses when he was little, was his office manager. Victor died in 1889, Grace in 1991. And there they are in their old age. It really makes you think about life when you look at these photographs and you see these young children and you see them as old people and then you read their obituaries. It makes you think about your life and what's really important. Yeah. And there's Joyce, the little boy that wore the dresses when he was little, married Naomi Smith in 1924. By 1926, they were living in California, and he was working for Western Union. They would have 3 children. They were separated in 1950, and he's living with his brother Victor. And they were divorced in 1966. He married again, Mary Thomas, and they were divorced in 1977. John passed away in 1989 and is buried in Los Angeles. And there's another picture of Joyce or John. Pictures of the siblings together. And I wanted to tell you about our research methodology. Inside the museum, we worked heavily with the photos that we were sent and that were in our archives, with correspondence. This is how we handle emails. We print them out so we have a physical copy, and those are very important. Outside of the museum, we used Ancestry.com, historic newspapers. The Library of Congress has a lot of newspapers, and you can get a lot of information from them, the Michigan Historical Society, and oral interviews. And in this email, the sender tells us he knows he's related, he's a descendant of he's Gladys Stone's son. He knows the true story he's saying, the real story. And I tried to contact him, and he was dead. So the story about oral interviews, if somebody offers one, you better go really quick and get it. So we're just about to make our conclusion. Make sure you buy one of these. Don't leave without one of these $10 books. It's the best $10 you'll ever spend. Not only will you get the more details of this story, but you'll be supporting the museum, and we need lots of support. So our presentation shows the value of historic photos, and there's a story behind every photo, and Cheri knows how to get those stories. These historical photographs capture the family in various settings and give a view into their daily lives and experiences. Some of the experiences a little bit tawdry. The archival photos spark research that reveals the story of a wife's physical and mental abuse and the eventual tar and feathering of her husband and the aftermath that followed. And this program reveals the work of the Historical Society's archives and the efforts to preserve and share the stories of donated photos and preserve them for future generations. There'll be people follow us, and they'll be delighted that we are taking the time to preserve our photos, digitizing videos, and digitizing oral histories. That is the way to go, and that's what these photos spurred us to do. And Cheri's going to make a comment. Don't forget to get one of these. Buy 2.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
This was so fun to do when we got those photographs and had to right away practically try to determine why, number one, why do we have them and who are these kids? It was a lot of fun, a lot of hard work. But, I've done ancestry for years and years for a lot of my family and friends. And once you start a tree, and I think Mary Lynn can attest to this, you, like with Mary Fulton, it was like going down a rabbit hole. You really had to find out what happened to that woman, and she did quite well, you know. We never could figure out why Mary married Henry again. We never, who's gonna know that? Nobody's gonna know that, but she did. And it turned into tragedy again. But then by 1920 or 25, they're back together again. And they're all buried out in the same cemetery plot with 2 or 3 of their kids. And a grandson, and there's a grandson buried with them too. So, this was an amazing story. I hope you enjoyed it. We loved putting it together. I told Steve when we got here to set up tonight for this afternoon that there's gotta be another story in that archive room somewhere, and I think we should try to look for it over the winter.
Yeah.
So that we can, do this again for you, because, it was fun. We had a good time.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
The stories are endless in the archive.
Are there any descendants still involved with at the CSA or on the North Shore?
I'm sorry.
Are there any descendants of the Wannamaker family still involved in CSA? or-
Liz and Walter Stone had a daughter, B Stone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew her. I never knew the lady. I know Jane Purkis knew her, very well. She's been at these famous birthday parties or something.
She's at the homesteader right now.
Is she?
Yeah.
Is she?
Really?
Oh,
There's your other story.
Yeah.
E.
Stone. Do they stay in the area or do they?
Yeah.
Lockhart.
Lockhart Field.
Yeah, I know, but I mean.
I don't know if they're still here, but the Lockharts were a big name in Frankfurt for a long time.
I know, but. Yeah, well, they were kids up here. And, there is, I didn't put it in the slides, on the marriage registry. I gotta think who it is, Steve. There was Homer and Alva, I believe Gladys and Walter.
Mhm.
And they were gonna get married on the same day. They registered together, and I thought they did. And I went back and then research, I find that, no, they got married in Minnesota. I thought, okay, I thought they were gonna get married together. So I went back and they didn't get married in 1920. Alva and Homer got married in 1921. But I think they intended to marry and have a double wedding, and for whatever reason it didn't happen. But, this was a fascinating story to get into. It just had lots of twists and turns, but we had a good time with it.
Was the original packet of, the original letter and packet that started you on all this, was it from Chuck Stone?
No, it came from Mary Ann Trigg from California, and she ended up with this, the kid photos, and she was connected to the Wannamaker family by marriage.
Okay.
So she's got these photos. What is she gonna do? I don't even know if she knew who they were.
Yeah. Oh.
None of them were labeled. There was nothing, a little bit of writing on the back, but not much. Most of it was on the front. And that was done by Walter, Mary's brother, the uncle. So it didn't take very long to figure out who the kids were.
So did you contact Chuck Stone then, or how did you get that letter from
He
him?
was dead.
It was in our archive, and I tried to call him and email him, and then I found out he was deceased. And what did that letter say? What was? It said that, give him he gave a little bit of the background. He said, Henry started founded Amistad, and he gave a few facts, but he said, if you want the real story, the true story, give me a call.
Yeah.
And I tried to, and he was dead, and I was so disappointed.
Wow.
And, we sent one of these really nice copies that you should get of this book. Mary Ann Trigg, and she was delighted with it. So much so, she's ordered several of them to give to the Wannamaker family. That would be the grandchildren and great grandchildren of these people.
Well,
So-
did they maintain their lot in the CSA or not?
No.
There's,
I'm not sure.
The cottage at 157 South Shore
Yes,
was sold to the Simons family
yes,
in 1914 from
Yeah.
Evanston, Illinois,
okay,
and they still have the cottage in their family.
yes.
but
And
they
it's called the
obviously,
Woodcutter's Cabin.
but they retained some land over in Oberlin because Chuck and B. Stone's house that I
Yes.
was in several times for her famous parties, was in that Oberlin tract.
The lot that Bee and her husband had was a gift from Gladys and Walter.
Yeah, right. Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite a holding there in Oberlin. They had a large number of lots, Mary did.
right.
So that's Shelley.
What happened to Uncle Walter? Yeah.
Yes, he went on and had some children, and that's about all we know.
Well, I don't think this is my ancestry stuff. I don't think I brought in Walters today.
Yeah, he made that big difference in the lives that summer of 1906. The good part of our story, the big human interest story, of those kids having a great time, learning about frogs and turtles, collecting rocks and running around and dancing in the moonlight, and
All kinds of.
all kinds of fun stuff.
Was that the only summer that they were all up here?
No, they were several more.
Okay,
She was still here in where they would stay at the CSA during the warm months. And then they would move into Frankfurt like a lot of them did and stay at hotels and boarding homes and whatever. For whatever reason, Henry's up here by October of 1908 and convinces her to marry him again.
So the children went to school in Frankfurt then?
Yes,
hmm,
yeah, they would have.
Did any of them graduate from Frankfurt?
I don't think so, Jane. They were back in Amistad. Well,
They might have, we haven't, there's just so many
We can figure that
things
out.
to know.
we don't know where they went after mom and dad got married again.
Okay.
They might have been down in Amistad, in 1908. We don't know.
I want to know why Amistad needs so many ministers.
yeah.
Barry Fulton was down there.
Great answer.
Did okay for herself. I can't believe she was still in that town in 1913. That just blew me away when I found that marriage. I thought she should have been ridden out there on a rail in 1911, but for whatever reason, she was there. Crazy.
So we can assume that they summered in the CSA until 1914 when they.
That's
sold
when the
that-
Simons family
When,
bought the.
when they
157.
sold that place, that cottage in 1914, probably.
Yeah,
They were separated by 1911. When
Yeah.
everything hit the fan again, and, I don't know where she went. I found her in Detroit with the kids in 1915.
But she could have been coming up for summer
She could have very
Three
times.
times.
Her mom and dad had a lot of money. They were very prominent in New Haven, but they were both gone by 1918. Her dad was gone by 1911 or something. And her brother Walter, he went into the forestry. He was well known in the forestry, business, yes.
yeah, Uncle Walter went into the
Yeah.
Forest Service.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
right.
he went to school for, and he
And that's why he spent so much time introducing those kids to natural history, the forest, the
Yeah.
lore of the forest, and dancing, rock collecting, and all the different things he knew, but especially of the life in the forest in the summer.
What was Walter's last name?
Riley, that's-
Oh, yeah, that's right. And he was well known in forestry
Yes,
circles.
very well known,
Yeah,
very well known.
don't leave without your companion guide. $10.